The orphanage smelled like old wood and lye soap. 8 children stood in a crooked line on the porch, their hands clasped in front of them, their faces scrubbed raw. The oldest girl, maybe 14, kept her eyes down. The youngest boy, no more than 5, clung to her skirt. They had been standing there for an hour. Reverend Samuel Thorne sat on his horse at the edge of the property, watching. He hadn't meant to stop. He'd been riding through Montana Territory on his way to a town called Ridgeway, where a small congregation had written him a letter asking for a preacher. He'd planned to pass through Copper Bend without so much as a glance. But then he'd seen them. 8 children lined up like cattle at auction. A woman in a grey dress stood beside them, her face thin and tired. She held a ledger in her hands. A few townspeople had gathered in the yard, couples mostly, dressed in Sunday clothes even though it was Thursday. They circled the children slowly, whispering to one another, pointing. Samuel felt his stomach turn. He dismounted and tied his horse to the fence. His boots crunched on the gravel as he walked closer. The woman looked up, her expression wary. "Reverend," she said, nodding, "didn't expect clergy today." "I wasn't planning to stop," Samuel replied quietly. His eyes moved over the children again. They were thin, too thin. Their clothes were patched and faded, their shoes worn through at the toes. The oldest girl still hadn't looked up. "What's happening here?" Samuel asked, though he already knew. The woman sighed. "Orphanage is closing. Town can't afford to keep it open anymore. We're finding homes for the children before the end of the month." "Finding homes," Samuel repeated. The words tasted bitter. "Yes," the woman's voice was clipped, defensive. "Good homes, Christian homes." Samuel looked at the couples in the yard. One man was crouched in front of a little boy with red hair, studying him like he was a horse he might buy. A woman was running her fingers through a girl's braids, checking for lice. "How many have been taken?" Samuel asked. "3 so far," the woman said. "A family took 2 of the younger ones last week. Another couple took a boy yesterday." "And the rest?" The woman glanced at the line of children, her jaw tightened. "We are trying." Samuel stepped closer to the porch. The oldest girl finally looked up. Her eyes were gray, sharp, guarded. She didn't say anything, but her hand tightened on the little boy's shoulder. "What's your name?" Samuel asked gently. "Ruth," she said. Her voice was flat, careful. "And the others?" She hesitated, then gestured down the line. "That's Jonah, he's 12, then Esther, she's 10, then Thomas, 8, Mary, 7, Caleb, 6, and this is Daniel." She looked down at the boy clinging to her. "He's 5. 8 of you," Samuel said. "Used to be more," Ruth said. Her voice didn't waver. "Some got taken, some died." Samuel felt something twist in his chest. A man in a dark coat approached the porch, his wife trailing behind him. He pointed at Esther, the 10-year-old. "That one," he said. "She looks strong enough to help in the kitchen." The woman with the ledger nodded and made a note. Esther's face went pale. She looked at Ruth, then at the ground. "Just the one?" the woman asked. "Just the one," the man confirmed. "We've got 3 of our own already, can't take more." Samuel's hands curled into fists at his sides. The man stepped onto the porch and reached for Esther's arm. She flinched, but didn't pull away. Ruth's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. "Wait," Samuel said. The man turned, annoyed. "Something you need, Reverend." Samuel stepped forward. His voice was low, steady. "You're taking her alone." "That's right. And the rest?" The man shrugged. "Not my concern." Samuel looked at Ruth. She was staring at him now, her gray eyes burning. He saw the question there, the one she wouldn't ask aloud. "Are you going to stop this?" Samuel turned back to the man. "Let her go." The man's expression darkened. "Excuse me." "I said let her go." The man's wife stepped forward, her face tight with indignation. "Reverend, we've been approved by the orphanage. We have every right." "I'm not questioning your right," Samuel interrupted. "I'm questioning your humanity." The yard went quiet. The woman with the ledger cleared her throat. Reverend Thorne, I understand your feelings, but these arrangements have been made in accordance with. With what? Samuel's voice rose, sharp and sudden. With the law, with decency, you're splitting them apart like livestock. Ruth's breath hitched. Samuel heard it. The man in the dark coat released Esther's arm and stepped off the porch, his face red. Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who's tired of watching people dress up cruelty and call it charity, Samuel said. The man spat into the dirt and turned to his wife. Come on, we'll find another orphanage. They left. The woman with the ledger stared at S. Samuel, her mouth pressed into a thin line. You just cost that girl a home. No, Samuel said quietly, you did. The woman snapped the ledger shut and walked back into the orphanage without another word. The yard emptied. The other townspeople drifted away, murmuring to each other. Samuel stood alone in the dust, the 8 children still lined up on the porch, watching him. Ruth spoke first. Her voice was small, careful. Nobody adopts more than 3. Samuel looked at her. They say it's too many, Ruth continued. Too expensive, too much trouble, so they take the young ones, the pretty ones, the quiet ones, she paused, and they leave the rest of us behind. Samuel's throat tightened. We are 8 children, Ruth said. Her voice cracked just barely. Nobody adopts more than 8. Samuel looked at them, at their thin faces, their worn clothes, their eyes that had learned too young not to hope. He thought of the letter in his saddlebag, the congregation in Ridgeway, the small church with the leaking roof, and the people who needed a shepherd. He thought of the life he'd planned. And then he thought of the life standing in front of him. Samuel took a slow breath. He climbed the steps of the porch and knelt in front of Daniel, the smallest boy. The child stared at him with wide, frightened eyes. What if someone did? Samuel asked quietly. Ruth frowned. Did what? Adopted all 8 of you. The children went still. Ruth's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, something fragile and dangerous. That's not possible, she said. Why not? Because nobody, her voice caught. She looked away. Because nobody wants all of us. Samuel stood. He looked at each of them in turn. Jonah, with his crooked nose and scarred knuckles. Esther, who had almost been taken. Thomas, Mary, Caleb, all of them silent, watchful, waiting for the next betrayal. I do, Samuel said. Ruth stared at him. You don't even know us. No, Samuel agreed, but I know what it's like to be left behind. The silence stretched long and fragile. Then Daniel, the little boy, reached out and took Samuel's hand. And Samuel felt the weight of 8 lives settle onto his shoulders, like a vow he hadn't spoken yet, but would carry until the day he died. The woman with the ledger returned an hour later. Her name was Mrs. Calloway, and she looked at Samuel like he was a fool. You can't just take 8 children, Reverend, she said flatly. Why not? Samuel asked. Because you're a single man, you don't have a home, you don't have a wife, you don't have. I have a calling, Samuel interrupted, and a congregation waiting for me in Ridgeway. I'll have a parsonage, a roof, a garden. Mrs. Calloway crossed her arms. A parsonage isn't big enough for 8 children. Then I'll make it bigger. And how will you feed them? The same way anyone feeds a family, Samuel said. I'll work, I'll pray, I'll figure it out. Mrs. Calloway studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed and opened the ledger. You'll need to sign papers, provide references, prove you can care for them. I will. She hesitated. Why? Samuel looked back at the porch, where the children were sitting now, their legs dangling over the edge. Ruth was braiding Mary's hair. Jonah was whittling a stick. Caleb was asleep with his head on Esther's lap. Because no one else will, Samuel said simply. Mrs. Calloway's expression softened just slightly. They've been through hell, Reverend. They don't trust easy. I wouldn't either, Samuel said. She nodded slowly. I'll start the paperwork, but you should know Ruth won't let them go without a fight. She's been their mother since she was 10 years old. She'll test you, she'll push, she'll make you prove you mean it." "Good," Samuel said. Mrs. Calloway left. Samuel walked back to the porch and sat down beside Ruth. She didn't look at him. "You mean it?" she asked after a long silence. "Yes." "Why?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, tarnished pocket watch. He held it in his palm, the metal warm from being close to his chest. Ruth glanced at it. "What's that?" "My brother's," Samuel said. "His name was Isaac. He was younger than me, not by much, just 2 years." Ruth said nothing, but she was listening. "Our parents died when I was 12, Samuel continued. "Cholera. The church tried to find us a home, but no one wanted 2 boys. Too much trouble, they said, too many mouths to feed." Ruth's fingers stilled in Mary's hair. "So they split us up," Samuel said. His voice was steady, but his hands weren't. "I was sent to a farm in Kansas. Isaac was sent to a family in Missouri. They told me it was temporary. They told me we'd see each other again." "Did you?" Ruth asked quietly. Samuel shook his head. "He died 3 years later. Fever. I didn't even know until a letter came 6 months after he was buried." Ruth looked at him now, her gray eyes searching. "I never stopped thinking about him," Samuel said. "About what would have happened if someone had just kept us together, if someone had just said, 'These boys belong with each other.'" He closed his hand around the watch. "I can't bring Isaac back," Samuel said, "but I can make sure you and your brothers and sisters don't end up like we did." Ruth's jaw trembled. She looked away quickly, blinking hard. "You don't have to believe me yet," Samuel said, "but I'm going to prove it to you." Ruth didn't respond, but when Samuel stood to leave, she didn't tell him not to come back. The next day, Samuel returned with supplies: bread, salt pork, a bag of apples. He sat with the children in the orphanage yard and let them eat while he talked to Mrs. Calloway about the adoption process. Jonah didn't speak to him. Esther watched him warily. Thomas asked if Samuel had a dog. Caleb asked if he had candy. Mary asked if he was going to take them away from Ruth. "No," Samuel said firmly. "Ruth comes too. All of you come together." Daniel climbed into Samuel's lap and fell asleep there. Ruth sat apart from the others, her arms wrapped around her knees. She watched Samuel like she was waiting for him to flinch, to change his mind, to prove her right. But he didn't. 2 days later, Mrs. Calloway handed Samuel a stack of papers. "It's done," she said. "They're yours, legally." Samuel stared at the documents. His name, written 8 times, 8 lives bound to his. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Calloway said quietly. She hesitated. "Ruth's mother, she left something before she died. She made me promise to give it to whoever took Ruth in." She handed Samuel a folded letter, yellowed and fragile. Samuel opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, written by someone who knew they were dying. "To whoever reads this, please keep them together. Ruth will try to hold them all by herself, but she's just a child. Don't let her carry this alone. They've already lost so much. Don't let them lose each other." Her name was Ruth because I prayed she would be loyal and strong, like the Ruth in the Bible. She is, but even Ruth needed Naomi. Please be her Naomi. Samuel's vision blurred. He folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket right next to Isaac's watch. When he walked back outside, Ruth was standing in the yard, her arms crossed. "Are you really taking all of us?" she asked. "Yes, to Ridgeway. Yes, and you won't change your mind." Samuel knelt in front of her. "Ruth, I give you my word before God, I will not leave you behind, not you, not any of them." Her lip quivered. She bit down hard, trying to stop it. "We're a family now," Samuel said, "whether you believe it yet or not." Ruth's walls cracked, just a little. She didn't cry, but she nodded. And for the first time, Samuel saw something in her eyes that wasn't just survival. It was hope. They left Copper Bend 3 days later. Samuel bought a wagon with the last of his savings and loaded the children into the back with their few belongings, threadbare blankets, a wooden horse, a doll with one arm missing. The journey to Ridgeway took 5 days. The children were quiet at first, unsure of what to do with freedom, but slowly they began to relax. Jonah sat up front with Samuel and asked questions about the stars. Esther sang hymns under her breath. Thomas and Caleb threw rocks at fence posts. Mary picked wildflowers and tucked them into Ruth's braid. Daniel never left Samuel's side. Ruth still watched, still waited. On the fourth night, they camped near a river. Samuel built a fire and cooked beans in a cast-iron pot. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in weeks. After supper, Ruth sat beside Samuel while the others slept. "What if they don't want us?" she asked quietly. "Who?" "The people in Ridgeway. What if they don't want a preacher with 8 children?" Samuel stirred the embers with a stick. "Then they'll get used to it." Ruth almost smiled. But the smile faded when she looked up and saw the riders. 3 men on horseback, silhouetted against the twilight. They came slowly, deliberately, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Samuel stood. "Stay with the children," he said quietly. Ruth's hand went to the knife she kept hidden in her boot. The riders stopped 20 feet from the fire. The one in front dismounted. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a deputy's badge pinned to his vest. "Evening, Reverend," the man said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Evening," Samuel replied. The deputy looked past him at the wagon, at the children huddled in the shadows. "That's a lot of young ones you've got there." "They're mine," Samuel said. "All of them. All of them." The deputy smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Funny, I heard you picked them up from the orphanage in Copper Bend. Heard you signed papers real quick. Didn't even wait for a proper review." Samuel's jaw tightened. The papers were legal. "Maybe," the deputy said. He stepped closer. "But the thing is, Reverend, we've had complaints. Folks saying you coerced Mrs. Calloway, saying you manipulated the process." "That's a lie," Samuel said flatly. The deputy shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, I'm here to escort you back to Copper Bend so we can sort it out." Ruth stepped out from behind the wagon, her face pale. "You can't take us back." The deputy's gaze slid to her. "This doesn't concern you, girl." "Yes, it does," Ruth said. Her voice was shaking, but she didn't back down. "We're his now. He signed the papers, you can't." "Ruth," Samuel said quietly, "it's all right." "No, it's not," she snapped. She looked at the deputy. "Who sent you?" The deputy's smile faded. "Who sent you?" Ruth repeated louder. One of the other riders shifted in his saddle. "Careful, girl," he muttered. But Ruth didn't stop. Was it the Harrisons, the couple who wanted Esther? The deputy's silence was answer enough. Samuel felt his blood go cold. "They paid you," he said. The deputy's hand drifted toward his gun. "I'm an officer of the law, Reverend. You're coming back to Copper Bend. We can do this easy, or we can do it hard." Samuel stepped in front of Ruth. "You're not taking them. You don't have a choice." "Yes," Samuel said quietly, "I do." The deputy drew his gun. And then Jonah stepped into the firelight, holding Samuel's rifle. The boy's hands were steady, his eyes were not. "Put it down, son," the deputy said. Jonah didn't move. "Jonah," Samuel said gently, "it's all right, lower the gun." "No," Jonah said, his voice cracked. "They'll split us up, they'll take Esther, they'll take all of us." "Not while I'm breathing," Samuel said. "They'll kill you," Jonah whispered. Samuel met the boy's eyes. "Then I'll die keeping you together." Jonah's hands trembled, but he lowered the rifle. The deputy holstered his gun, smirking. "Smart kid." And then a voice called out from the darkness. "I wouldn't." Everyone turned. A man stepped into the firelight, older, gray-bearded, with a marshal's star pinned to his chest. Behind him were 4 more men, all armed. The deputy's face went white. "Marshal Greer," he stammered. "Deputy Coltrane," the marshal said coldly. "Funny place to find you, 50 miles outside your jurisdiction." Coltrane shifted. "I was just." "Just what? Harassing a preacher on behalf of some rich couple who didn't get their way?" Greer stepped closer. "I know the Harrisons. I know what they paid you. And I know you've been running this little racket for months, scaring families, splitting up children, taking bribes." Coltrane's hand moved toward his gun. Greer's men raised their rifles. Coltrane froze. "You're done," Greer said quietly. "Get out of here before I arrest you myself." Coltrane and his men rode off into the dark. Marshal Greer turned to Samuel. "You all right, Reverend?" Samuel nodded, still catching his breath. "How did you?" "Mrs. Calloway sent me a telegram," Greer said. "Told me what you did. Told me the Harrisons were making noise." He looked at the children. "Figured I'd make sure you got to Ridgeway in one piece." Ruth stared at him. "You came all this way, for us." Greer's expression softened. "Some things are worth riding for, kid." He tipped his hat to Samuel. "You've got a good thing here, Reverend. Don't let anyone tell you different." And then he and his men disappeared into the night, as quietly as they'd come. Samuel sank down by the fire, his hands shaking. Ruth sat beside him. "You really would have died for us," she said. "It wasn't a question." Samuel looked at her. "Yes." For the first time since they'd met, Ruth cried. And Samuel held her while she did. They reached Ridgeway the next afternoon. The town was small, maybe 200 people, a general store, a saloon, a schoolhouse, and a white chapel with a crooked steeple. Samuel's parsonage sat behind the church, a modest two-room cabin with a sagging porch and a roof that needed patching. It was too small. But it was home. The congregation gathered to meet them, farmers, shopkeepers, widows, families. They brought bread, preserves, quilts, firewood. They didn't ask questions. They didn't judge. They just helped. An old carpenter named Mr. Hackett took one look at the cabin and said, "We'll add on 2 more rooms. Have it done in a month." A woman named Mrs. Prout handed Ruth a basket of fabric. "For dresses," she said, "the girls will need them." Jonah was given a job mucking stables. Esther was invited to help in the church kitchen. Thomas and Caleb were enrolled in the schoolhouse. And Daniel refused to sleep anywhere but beside Samuel's bed. The first Sunday, Samuel preached to a packed chapel. He spoke about mercy, about family, about the grace of second chances. The congregation wept. After the service, an old woman approached Samuel. She was small, bent with age, her hands gnarled from years of work. "You did a good thing, Reverend," she said. "I just did what was right," Samuel replied. She shook her head. "No. You did what was hard, and that's rarer. Take a deep breath, pour yourself some tea, and ask yourself this: if you were Samuel, would you have taken all 8, or would you have walked away, telling yourself it wasn't your responsibility?" If you're still here, tap subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends. Tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are right now, and what would you have done? One evening, a month after they arrived, Ruth found Samuel sitting on the porch, staring at Isaac's watch. She sat beside him. "You miss him," she said. "Every day," Samuel admitted. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I think he'd be proud of you." Samuel's throat tightened. "I hope so." "I know so," Ruth said. She pulled something from her pocket, a small wooden carving of a bird. "Jonah made it, for you. He won't give it to you himself because he's stubborn, but he wanted you to have it." Samuel took the carving, his hands trembling. "Why?" "Because you kept your word," Ruth said simply, "and nobody's ever done that before." Samuel looked at her. "I meant what I said, Ruth. You're my family now, all of you." Ruth smiled, a real smile, the first he'd ever seen from her. "I know." She stood and walked back inside, where Esther was teaching Mary a song, where Thomas and Caleb were arguing over a game of checkers, where Daniel was curled up by the fire. Samuel sat on the porch, the wooden bird in one hand, Isaac's watch in the other. And for the first time in 20 years, he felt like he'd finally come home. The house was finished by winter. 2 new rooms, an expanded kitchen, a loft for the boys. Mr. Hackett and a crew of volunteers worked through rain and cold to get it done before the first snow. When they were finished, Ruth cried again, not from sadness this time, but from something bigger, something she didn't have words for. The children thrived. Jonah grew stronger, his shoulders broadening from stable work. Esther learned to bake bread so good the church ladies asked for her recipe. Thomas became the fastest runner in school. Caleb learned to read. Mary sang in the church choir. And Daniel, the smallest, the quietest, finally learned to laugh. Ruth bloomed too. She let go inch by inch of the weight she'd carried for so long. She learned to be a child again, to play, to rest, to trust. Samuel watched it all with a heart so full it ached. But not everyone in town was pleased. 3 months after they arrived, a man named Victor Harrison rode into Ridgeway. He was the one who had wanted Esther, the one who had paid Deputy Coltrane. He stood in the middle of the church during Sunday service and pointed at Samuel. "This man is a fraud," Harrison announced. "He manipulated the system. He took children he had no right to take, and I'm here to set things right." The congregation went silent. Samuel stood slowly. "Mr. Harrison, this is a house of God. If you have something to say it outside." "I'll say it here," Harrison snapped. "You stole those children from families who wanted them, families who could provide for them. You're just a preacher with no money, no wife, no future. You can't give them what they need." Ruth stood. "He's given us everything." Harrison ignored her. "I'm taking this to the territorial judge. I'll have those adoption papers overturned. And when I do, I'll make sure you never." "You'll do nothing." The voice came from the back of the church. Marshal Greer stepped inside, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Behind him were a dozen townspeople, Mr. Hackett, Mrs. Prout, the school teacher, the store owner. "These people have something to say," Greer said. Mr. Hackett stepped forward. "I've watched Reverend Thorne with those children. I've seen him wake before dawn to chop wood so they'd stay warm. I've seen him give away his own supper so they could eat. If that's not a father, I don't know what is." Mrs. Prout nodded. "Those children are loved. They're safe. They're home. And you want to tear that apart because your pride was hurt." The school teacher spoke next. "Jonah is the hardest working boy I've ever taught. Esther helps feed half the widows in town. Thomas and Caleb are kind and brave. Mary has the voice of an angel. And little Daniel, that boy was barely alive when he got here. Now he smiles every day." One by one, the townspeople spoke. They spoke of Samuel's character, of the children's transformation, of the family that had formed in the span of a few months, a family built not on blood, but on choice. Harrison's face went red. "This is absurd. I have legal standing. I have money. I have." "Nothing," Greer interrupted. "You have nothing, no case, no credibility. And if you push this, I'll make sure every judge in the territory knows you tried to bribe a deputy to kidnap children." Harrison stared at him, his jaw working. Then he turned and walked out. The church erupted in whispers. Samuel stood at the pulpit, speechless. Ruth ran to him and threw her arms around his waist. One by one, the other children joined her. Jonah, Esther, Thomas, Mary, Caleb, Daniel, all of them clinging to Samuel like he was the only solid thing in the world. And maybe, in that moment, he was. Samuel knelt and wrapped his arms around all 8 of them. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're home, and no one is ever going to take you away from me." Epilogue. Years later, when Daniel was grown, he would tell the story to his own children. He would tell them about the day a preacher with nothing but faith and stubbornness looked at 8 broken children and said, "I want all of you." He would tell them about Ruth, who became a teacher, about Jonah, who became a carpenter like Mr. Hackett, about Esther, who married the schoolteacher's son and opened a bakery, about Thomas and Caleb, who ran a ranch together, about Mary, who sang at every wedding in 3 counties. And he would tell them about Samuel, the man who gave up his own plans, his own comfort, his own life, to make sure 8 children never had to be alone again. He wasn't a perfect man, Daniel would say, but he was a good one, and that was enough. On the mantel of Daniel's home, beside a photograph of the family taken years later, sat 2 objects, a tarnished pocket watch and a small wooden bird. Reminders of what it meant to be chosen. Reminders of what it meant to be loved. The sun set over Ridgeway, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the old parsonage, now expanded, now full of laughter, the family gathered for supper. 8 children, no longer children, 1 preacher, no longer alone. And a table that, for the first time in all their lives, felt like home.